Welcome to the Flourishing Journey podcast as we facilitate a series called the AHA Leader. This series is dedicated to school leaders who are courageous enough to look in the mirror and curious enough to keep growing. Every leader has blind spots, those unseen areas that quietly shape our decisions, influence our teams, and affect our school culture in ways we don't always realize. Yet awareness brings clarity, and clarity brings growth. In each episode, we'll uncover common leadership blind spots, those hidden habits, assumptions, and patterns that may be holding us back. Together, we'll turn those blind spots into aha moments that lead to greater wisdom, stronger teams, and more flourishing schools. I'm your host, Rachael Jones, as I collaborate with Dr. Bunn by inviting you to lean in, look deeper, and lead with fresh vision. Hello, flourishing practitioners. Welcome to the 8th episode of a 9-episode leader series on recognizing blind spots and making appropriate adjustments. Today's episode is called Attention to Detail That Slips into Micromanagement, where we consider ways leaders can maintain high standards without slipping into micromanagement by empowering teams while fostering trust. Hello, Edward. It's hard to believe that we are near the end of our leader series.
Yeah, it's great to be with you again, Rachel. And I love this topic for today and so excited to get started.
Yeah, when I read this episode title, I thought this is one many of our leaders will probably be able to relate with.
Absolutely.
Either that they have experienced micromanagement in the past, or it's something they struggle with in having that high level of excellence while also trusting their team. So, with that, what would you say are some warning signs that a leader's pursuit of excellence is starting to stifle creativity, trust, or ownership of their team?
Wow, that's a loaded question, but a great question. Warning signs. Let's see. Um, well, first of all, I think warning signs tend to show up in the culture of our organization, maybe before we as leaders even notice. So I think an example of that would be like when people stop bringing ideas forward. If every idea has to be refined or approved at multiple levels, eventually people are going to check out. They're going to decide maybe it's easier just to stay quiet. Um, Another sign would probably be initiative, like when initiative begins to decrease. So instead of teachers or leaders even trying maybe a new approach or new strategies, they start asking permission for everything. And not that permission is necessarily wrong, but in this case, I think we need to unpack it a little more because when they start asking for permission for everything, that often means they're kind of afraid of doing something wrong. And that's to me a warning sign. And then maybe one more would be, well, I've noticed this before as a leader, when the energy kind of drops in the meetings. It's kind of when excellence becomes perfectionism, meetings tend to shift from that collaborative problem solving to leaders simply correcting all the details. So I think maybe a good question to ask would be, are people trying things or are they waiting on me, the leader? And if the answer is that everyone waits for the leader, then I think excellence may have unintentionally turned into control.
Hmm. Yeah, those are great practical ways for leaders to gauge whether they're over controlling or whether they have created that environment where people feel, like you said, they can come with an idea and it doesn't have to be a perfectly thought out idea, but they can feel that safety to do that.
Absolutely.
So, why do you think leaders who value excellence sometimes tend to drift into over management or control?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say, there's nothing wrong with excellence, pursuit of excellence. Our God is a God of
Mhm.
excellence, and He's called us to a life of excellence. However, there is a caution in our pursuit of excellence, and I think, you're getting at it in this particular question is because many leaders can drift into over management because I think excellence and responsibility are very closely tied together. So, if I care deeply about the outcome, like for example, student learning or school culture or the mission of the school, it's easy to feel personally responsible for all the details, right? And we've all heard the buck stops with me when you're talking about the leader of an organization. But another reason is not just that close alignment between excellence and responsibility, and then maybe filling the extra weight, but another is, I think, experience. Often we as leaders, where we're successful, um, we've been very competent as former teachers, former administrators. So when something isn't done the way maybe we like it, the instinct is to jump in and fix it. And this is a double whammy for those that are fix it personalities also. But I think the key is maybe, leadership requires a shift from doing excellent work ourselves as a leader to building an excellent team. Not only building an excellent team, but building excellent systems with that team. And so I think that's critical and helpful. But I'd also say, too, and I've been there, there's also a fear component. Leaders know the stakes are high, especially in education. You got parents, students, and where they're going to go and what they're going to do and what they're called to be, boards, accreditation. And sometimes when those pressures rise, I think leaders often tighten control because it feels safer. That doesn't make it right, but these are simply some cautions and some considerations when we think about excellence versus, micromanagement.
Great. So here's a moment of personal reflection. Um, can you share a story when you personally stepped back or you let go of something and that actually led to better results or stronger team dynamics?
Yeah, I love the application questions. These are real and very beneficial. There was a key school initiative that I had a plan for, a vision for, if you will, but I knew I was not the right person to lead it. And so I began to unpack this with another school leader who I felt, this was their area of passion, this was their skill set, this was their experience. And so I just began to unpack that potential initiative with this particular school leader. And then it was obvious from the first conversation that this particular leader had a clear vision for improving instruction in our school. So initially, this particular leader was very hands-on, planning every detail of the training and guiding every conversation with the teachers. And eventually, this leader decided to step back, let a few of our experienced um, leader teachers kind of design some of the parts of the initiatives, and they set the outcomes, but the leader set the outcomes, but the teachers actually owned the approach to this initiative. And what happened was very powerful. The teachers created strategies that were actually more practical for the classroom than even the leaders had originally designed. Other faculty members, became more engaged because they saw their peers leading in this particular work. And I think not only did the initiative gain momentum, but the leadership capacity of the staff, I think, grew significantly. And I think the takeaway for me was sometimes stepping back doesn't lower excellence, it actually multiplies it. And because now the whole team in this case was contributing their expertise and were full owners of the process, the strategies, and the outcomes. And it was a powerful example of giving ownership to the team.
Yeah, that's a great example. And some key things you said was just giving ownership over it can just people get excited when they feel they can own it. They can make mistakes, they can come up with ideas, and there's that freedom and that safe environment to do that. And I loved what you said too about increasing capacity. So
Yeah.
often we talk as leaders about not having capacity, but could some of that be because we keep doing things that other people are very capable and willing to do? So, yeah, great example there. Well, while I love this topic and I think we could stay on it for a long time, I have one more question.
Yeah.
What are some practical steps a leader can take to balance excellence with empowerment within their teams, kind of like in the example that you were sharing?
Yeah, that's good. So thinking about both excellence and the empowerment of the team, I think maybe to begin with is just cl always clarify the what as a leader, but maybe loosen control over the how. In other words, leaders, should be very clear about the outcomes, about the values, but also allow teams to shape the strategies, that how. Um, Maybe another example would be delegating real ownership and not just the task. And we talked about delegating, creating capacity and the other question, but really delegating the ownership of it and not just the task itself. So when someone owns something, we know they also need to own the thinking, the decisions, the adjustments. And you mentioned something in your commentary about, it's okay to make some mistakes as we move towards the solution. I think that's part of it, and I think that should be allowed maybe more so than we do as leaders. So delegating that ownership, the fullness of it, and then maybe allow learning and experimentation to be in the very DNA of the organization. So we know that excellence grows in environments where people can try, they can reflect, they can improve, and not just execute perfectly the very first time. And I think this is big for me, and I hope for others too, but celebrate initiative and not just the results. Oftentimes we wait to the very end and we celebrate, we bring up the data, we celebrate the win, which is wrapped around the results. But when leaders affirm people who step forward, and create that initiative in the first place, they reinforce again that culture of ownership that I think is so very healthy for our organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I love especially what you said about allow the how to others to figure out the how. And I think that's something I can learn as well, because I think, we all have in our mind how things should be done, but it's
Exactly.
what you said about if they can figure out how to do it and really have ownership, not just, completing a list of tasks, we don't know what the success of that could be, and it could be done very well. And if nothing else, it was a great learning experience that
Absolutely.
they actually were able to work out. Well, thank you so much, Edward, for journeying with us today around the importance of meeting high standards while being careful not to micromanage our teams.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, again. It's always a joy to be with our listeners and unpack briefly, but hopefully in a very qualitative way, just leadership lessons that kind of move the needle for our organizations.
Yeah. Well, join us next month as we wrap up our leader series with episode 9 called Failing Forward, where Dr. Bunn reflects on lessons he has learned as a leader and ways in which he has grown. Until next time.
This episode was part of a 9-part series called The Aha Leader, uncovering common leadership blind spots and turning them into aha moments that lead to greater wisdom, stronger teams, and more flourishing schools. Catch every episode of this series and the entire Flourishing Journey podcast at acsi.org/podcasts.